Welcome to the Biz News Daybreak on Friday, the 6th of March, 2026. I'm Alec Hogg. Here's the sharp, actionable news you need to stay ahead today. Let's get straight into it. Lots of red ink on Wall Street last night as consequences of an extended war in Iran and much higher oil prices started to impact investor expectations, and in particular, what's going to happen with inflation. High inflation, not good for markets. The higher price of oil is particularly important here in South Africa. Our petrol and diesel prices are based on the rand cost of oil, and that has surged this week from 954 rand a barrel to 1,328 rand a barrel as the oil went up and the rand weakened. That's a jump of 40% since the war began and translates into an 8 rand a litre price shock. If the current levels hold when fuel prices are adjusted next month. Here's the freshest overnight news from our partners at Bloomberg.
Iran launched a fresh wave of missile and drone strikes across the Gulf. Attacks were reported in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait. The State Department closed the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, and we heard today from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on the U.S. operation. He said it will take as long as necessary.
Our authorities, his authorities, CENTCOM's authorities through the President and myself are maxed out. Our capabilities are overwhelming and gathering still, as are those of our Israeli partners. Our munitions are full up, and our will is ironclad, which means our timeline is ours and ours alone to control.
At the same time, Admiral Brad Cooper provided an update on the operation.
The President gave us another task, to raise or level Iran's ballistic missile industrial base. So we're not just hitting what they have, we're destroying their ability to rebuild. And so as we transition to the next phase of this operation, we will systemically dismantle Iran's missile production capability for the future, and that's absolutely in progress. This is going to take some time, but our forces are well supplied.
Meantime, President Trump told Axios that he needs to be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader. Trump said the son of the assassinated Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei would just continue his father's policies, and that, he said, would force the U.S. back to war. The price of crude oil jumped in New York, trading on signs Mideast flows are being disrupted. Energy infrastructure shutdowns may begin in the region. In the New York session, WTI surged 8.5% to $81, the highest level since January 2025. Prices then retreated a bit in the electronic session on a report of potential Treasury action within the U.S. oil futures market. Reuters reported an announcement could come soon. Meantime, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum said everything is being considered. Burgum also leads the National Energy Dominance Council. So far, President Trump has indicated his unwillingness to use the strategic petroleum reserves to alleviate pressures for consumers. Paisley Nardini is portfolio manager at Simplify Asset Management.
Provided these tensions persist, as we've seen, oil and gas still has a lot more to run. We're still sub $100 a barrel in oil. And if this continues for much longer, I think that we could easily surpass $100 per barrel of oil. Ultimately, that just leads to commodities being a core part of a portfolio for the diversification.
Paisley Nardini at Simplify Asset Management. Meantime, the Wall Street Journal is reporting foreign ministers of the Arab League member states will be holding an emergency meeting on Sunday. The U.S. will allow some Russian oil sales to India. This move will give India more options to purchase fuel as the war on Iran leads to a spike in global crude prices. Now, the U.S. Treasury Department will issue a temporary waiver allowing Indian refiners to purchase Russian oil. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it will not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government.
The broad-based S&P 500 index lost 0.5% last night. Nasdaq was off 0.25%. Earlier, the JSE was down 0.75%, dragged lower by a 2.5% fall in the resources index. The rand starts today at 16.60 against the US dollar. Gold and Bitcoin are steady at $5,150 an ounce and $71,250 a Bitcoin, respectively. Context on the oil price now from Bloomberg's economics chief, Jenny Welsh.
We did a scenario exercise actually months ago, well before this conflict, looking at what could happen in the Middle East and gaming out worst case scenarios, which are what's playing out right now in terms of a direct U.S., Israel, Iran conflict. And in our estimation, if there are going to be sustained, persistent disruptions to energy facilities in the region, the Strait of Hormuz, that could actually lead oil prices to top $100. We estimate reaching up to $108 a barrel. That's not where markets are today, and we think that's probably because they think that these will be short-term disruptions. The conflict doesn't look like it's anywhere close to ending, and in fact, Iran is promising a new wave of retaliation, just as President Trump is promising a new big wave of attacks. So I think we're likely to see fighting continue for at least the next few days. The question is, how long can Iran in particular sustain its attacks while its leadership is also under siege?
Jennifer, while you're doing that scenario analysis, how are you defining short-term versus long-term, and what would it take in terms of a conflict such as this to get oil prices up to that $112 a barrel?
I think it will be key to figure out for oil markets how long they think these disruptions are going to last. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively paralyzed right now. We don't see traffic really moving through it. The United States is trying to reopen it by promising naval escorts, insurance for ships. We haven't yet seen if there's going to be much uptake on it or how the U.S. is actually going to follow through on those policies. And the risk is that even if you take out a lot of Iran's missile launchers, as the United States and Israel have to date, they still have a lot of other weapons that they can use to disrupt traffic. All it takes is the odd drone attack to make tankers question the risk assessment of whether or not it's worth trying to travel through the strait. I think what we're watching to see is, when do oil markets start to grapple with that reality, and do we start to see them price it in more? At the moment, they seem to be betting that all of this is just going to be a few more days of disruption and we're going to be back to normal very soon. An important point of context is that there are multiple actors within Iran. Not all of them speak with the same voice, right? We heard similarly de-escalatory remarks from the foreign ministry earlier this week where they said, we're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz, at the same time that the IRGC was telling tankers to stay away. So I think it's important to pay attention to who are going to be the more authoritative voices in the system. Those are probably the ones that, for example, are more hardline, are more conservative, are less willing to work with the U.S., and are thinking, we are suffering pain, but we're going to make U.S. partners in the region and the global economy suffer more, and that's going to lead them to fold first. So at the moment, we see the more authoritative actors in Tehran just kind of digging in their heels and preparing to fight for a longer period of time.
The president seems to go back to what happened in Venezuela just a little over a month ago and talk about the success there, and Delcy Rodriguez is acting as president there right now. There is no Delcy Rodriguez of Iran. There is no person that the U.S. had lined up to take the role of the Ayatollah, or at least rule the country. What's a plausible scenario for what that looks like?
Yes, the contrast between Venezuela and Iran are limitless. And I think what's important to point out is, first, yes, the Islamic Republic has suffered some major losses of leaders and senior officials, but the system remains in place, and it's widespread and it is entrenched. There are people who are in the process of choosing a new supreme leader, and if for whatever reason that gets disrupted, there will be other candidates that they will choose from. The IRGC itself is 200,000 people spread across the country. So yes, Israel and U.S. strikes have taken out quite a few of the senior leaders, but there are still many of them remaining. So I think what all of that suggests is we're not likely to see what President Trump hoped for on Saturday morning when he announced these strikes of the Iranian people rising up and taking, I think as he referred to it, their future into their own hands. What we're likely to see is either a persistence of this system or a new, but probably still authoritarian system take its place. And so I don't think we're likely to see a Venezuela model where you have a government that maybe could move towards democracy on a somewhat orderly timeline. I think the best case is we either get a ceasefire with the current system, or we see a very chaotic and a very unpredictable world emerge where there is some sort of internal fighting or a complete collapse of the system and power vacuum.
Good news from Southern Africa. BizNews partner DCC Hotel Group showcases world-class hospitality across the region. We spotlight more than 100 carefully selected lodges supporting tourism, local communities, and conservation. Here in Hermanus, whale watching and coastal charm await. Your home for the BizNews Conference 2026.
Get context, no more. That's our credo here at Biz News. Well, coming up, there is more context on Donald Trump's insistence that he be involved in choosing the next Iranian leader. But first, ANC Top Seven member Nomvula Mokonyane yesterday visited the Iranian Embassy in Pretoria with some fanfare to sign a condolence book for the assassinated Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This brings South Africa's tightrope position on the war into sharp focus, as my colleague Chris Steyn and Dr. Edward Minnie discussed yesterday. Here's a clip from the interview. Dr. Minnie is a professor at the University of North Georgia in the United States, and he is the executive director of the Strategic Studies program there.
What for South Africa? If Iran fell, what would be the consequences?
Yeah, I think it behooves the South African government to reassess, their relationship with the United States. I know there's a lot of animosity there. The United States ambassador was approved recently by the Senate. He was confirmed, and he's now there in Pretoria. And from what I've just briefly seen, he's there for constructive talks and looks forward to building a strong relationship with South Africa. So there's an opportunity for South Africa to grab this opportunity and to develop it in the interests of South Africa, in the interest of all South Africans. I cannot see any positive outcome from hanging on to a Iranian regime that is now, quite frankly, on their knees. There's nothing positive that comes out of that. And of course, building a strong relationship with the United States, there will be certain, let's call it demands. I don't think either country can afford terror camps to be within the borders of South Africa, so that would have to go. The fact that we're even talking about this, Chris, is just beyond me. That we would have camps like that. And I say there's an opportunity for the South African government to move forward on a positive note with the U.S. administration, and everyone will benefit from that.
If not, how likely are personal sanctions on certain leaders here?
Of course, this is always an option, and we can expect that to be considered if the belligerence remains, and personal sanctions, even freezing of financial assets that are abroad is a possibility as well. But I hope it doesn't go down that pathway. That there will be reasonable sort of behavior and a positive interaction.
Lastly, what is your view of this talk of President Cyril Ramaphosa's brother-in-law, Patrice Motsepe, possibly being in the running for the next president of the party?
Chris, I want to maybe step back and just reflect on the support that the ANC is enjoying as a party. It has dwindled over the years since 1994. I don't know if much will change having Motsepe as a potential leader of the ANC. I don't know how they untangle themselves, the leadership, from the enormous amount of corruption that has taken place that is now absolutely endemic. It's within the fiber of the ANC. And I can't see that turning around overnight. It doesn't matter who leads the party.
Well, as we heard at the top of the show, Donald Trump is determined to be involved in the selection of the new Iranian leader and is camped again the Ayatollah's son, succeeding him, North Korean style. His wishes are of no concern to the Iranian regime, as we hear from inside the country, where the FT's Tehran's correspondent, Najmeh Bozorgmeh, breaks down the highly confidential succession process, revealing that Mojtaba Khamenei, the late Supreme Leader's second son, has emerged as the leading candidate in the initial voting.
These sessions are confidential, so there are no official details confirmed yet. But from what we have learned, it seems Mujtaba Khamenei, the second son of the late Supreme Leader, is the leading candidate in the initial voting. That doesn't mean it's final, but it does indicate he's in a strong position. If he's chosen, we need to wait and see what kind of leader he would be. There is hardly any public records of his religious opinions and political or cultural possessions. If I'm not wrong, only once we have heard his voice in a short video, and that's it.
So it seems like whoever the Council of Experts picks as the next supreme leader of Iran will almost certainly face the threat of assassination. How serious is that threat?
As we all know, Israel has threatened to target the successors of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, similar to what they did with Lebanon's Hezbollah. But this hasn't been publicly discussed in Tehran, and I believe all senior figures are under tight security protection. Still, it's a significant concern, especially given that dozens of senior figures have been assassinated since the June war and during this current conflict.
Najmeh, what does a new leader mean for Iran and the war, and does it really change anything?
This war is being managed by the Revolutionary Guards, and it seems that many decisions that they are taking today were made in advance on how to handle this conflict. Under the current circumstances, choosing the next leader isn't directly related to the war. But according to the Constitution, the Supreme Leader holds ultimate authority, and it's up to the leader to use all his power as Ali Khamenei did or choose not to. We'll have to wait and see how things unfold in the coming days. But one thing is certain, if you ask me, Iran is entering a new phase in its modern history.
That's the FT's Tehran correspondent, Najmeh Bezorgmer. Thanks, Najmeh.
Thank you.
We close the show for this week with an insightful snippet from my conversation with Piet Viljoen, shaped around what investors should be doing now. Piet manages a worldwide flexible fund that he affectionately calls the Cockroach. In this clip, Piet discusses background to his strategy of holding a high exposure to previously inexpensive energy assets as a protective measure against just the kind of unpredictable global events we're going through right now. He also channels Warren Buffett's approach to geopolitics and dives into the world of cryptocurrency, telling us why he has allocated a portion of his portfolio to it. Let's take a listen.
In the fund I manage, the one I nicknamed the Cockroach, the Worldwide Flexible Fund, I haven't done a trade for 10 days. I've done nothing different, but I'm sitting with a portfolio that has a high exposure to energy assets because, number one, they're inexpensive, and number two, they are a protection against exactly this sort of thing. So, they were in the portfolio not because I expected it or forecasted. It's because they protect against exactly this sort of thing, which might or might not happen. And if it doesn't happen, well, then, they're not going to do very much. But it does happen, and so that helps.
So geopolitics generally, I can remember Warren Buffett saying at one of those Berkshire AGMs, we don't focus on the big stuff. It's too hard to call. We actually focus on the individual companies. Now, has that been a strategy that you would look at today going forward?
I think it's always a sensible strategy. And I think Mr. Buffett has always been very polite. He says it's too hard to forecast these geopolitical events. I would go a step further to say it's impossible to forecast geopolitical. So I would always look at putting together a portfolio that consists of undervalued assets, be they asset classes or stocks. It doesn't really matter, but I think that's where one should spend your time, is looking for undervalued assets and how to incorporate a combination of those assets into a sensible portfolio. That's a much better use of time than sitting there trying to forecast what's going to happen in the future and then building a portfolio based on that forecast.
Of all the asset managers in South Africa, there are very few who have even given a slight thumbs up to Bitcoin. You have, and it's due to you that we were prepared to put it into the BizNews portfolios, and the tribe have done very well out of that. The latest feedback that we're getting from the crypto gang is that Iranians have now rediscovered Bitcoin is a really good way to protect your capital. And it was up 7% last night after coming under a lot of pressure. How are you reading the whole Bitcoin market right now?
So Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, it's quite possible that the blockchains on which these cryptocurrencies are based. In other words, if one gets back to basics, what are cryptocurrencies? They're the reward for solving cryptograms which keep information secure on a blockchain in a decentralized format. So that's what a cryptocurrency is. There is a non-negligible chance that blockchain technology changes the way the financial service system works, changes the rails on which it runs, and creates tremendous value. And that value will then ultimately be reflected in the price of the different cryptocurrencies associated with these blockchains. So my point of departure has always been, I think that chance is non-negligible. And as a result, I would always allocate a portion of my portfolio to those cryptocurrencies. I wouldn't put all my money into it, just like I wouldn't put all my money in South Africa, although I believe that, that assets are cheap here. I still wouldn't put all my money into it. And the same goes for Bitcoin. I think it has the possibility of a massively value-creating future, but I don't know whether it's going to be the case or not.
Piet Viljoen is the founder of ReCM, and that worldwide flexible fund goes under the banner of Merchant West. Well, thank you for joining us for today's BizNews Daybreak. To stay ahead of the curve and read more from our expert contributors, make sure you visit biznews.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share it with your network. I'm Alec Hogg, wishing you a prosperous day. We'll be back on Monday.